Hello, family, and welcome to Role Models Experts Cafe. I am your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer, and today with me, I have a special friend of mine, Miss Deanna Hansen. She happened to have shown up in our Health, Wealth, and Wisdom Summit. She was amazing, and I thought that she definitely needs to come here and talk a little bit more in depth about what she does, her message, and how she shows up in the world. I really love the material that she has to offer. I really think it's valuable and oftentimes overlooked in its significance and its importance. So I want you guys to lend your ears to me for the next 15, 20 minutes and let's have Deanna talk a little bit about herself and how she came to do what she does. And actually, what it is that she works and helps with. So, Deanna, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here with us again. And please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. L. It is an absolute pleasure to be here and to be sharing with your community. I so appreciate this. So I have been an athletic therapist since 1995, and I was always focusing in deep tissue work. So I had a really good sense of what scar tissue felt like in the body. Now, at the same time, even though I had a really strong, healthy practice, my own personal body was quite the opposite. Even though I was doing what I was taught as an athletic therapist in school, one of my main goals was to lose weight. I was 50 pounds overweight at the time and struggling with anxiety, depression, constipation, chronic pains. And the harder I worked, the worse my body seemed to get, which was very deflating because you're working really hard to get a result and all of the efforts are going in the opposite direction. So by the time I turned 30, I made some major changes in my life. And as a result of that, I started having these really powerful anxiety attacks. This one anxiety attack in particular was the seed of everything to come, because in that moment, I actually thought I was going to die. I couldn't find my breath. And for some reason, I dove my hand into my abdomen, which I never touched this area because this was where I stored the majority of my weight. So I hated this area. I never touched it. I really just kind of avoided it all of the time. And so now I'm diving my hand in here. And the first thing that happened is I connected to immense pain, which I didn't even know was stored in there. But the pain brought me out of the anxiety attack. It brought me back to the ground. And I was very aware that, okay, I'm safe. I'm not going to die in this moment. But what was also interesting is I just intuitively started to explore the tissue with my hands. And I noticed that it was marbled with what felt like scar tissue, even though I hadn't had any injury or surgery in that area. So suddenly I was having these aha moments that no wonder coming home from a 5 mile run, dripping wet with sweat, my abdomen would still feel cold. So for the first night, I just intuitively was exploring for about 45 minutes. And what was just so amazing was how calm I felt, because anxiety was something that I was very connected to. And so to feel calm in that moment was really exciting. And I woke up the next day and that feeling of peace lasted throughout the day. So I came home that night excited to explore again. And I did so for another 45 minutes or so. And the second time I stood up, I felt taller. And I went and I looked at myself in the mirror and I literally began to cry because my belly was flatter than it had looked in years. And I'm quite extreme in my behaviors. So I would go all out. I would be doing 400 sit-ups a day, Taebo aerobics. I was dieting. I was doing all of these things. And in 2 days, my belly was flatter than it had looked in years. So this became my new focus. So every time I would come home from work after working on patients, I would continue to explore my body. And after 2 weeks, my chronic low back pain was disappearing. And I started to flip my patients onto their backs because I wanted to see if I could get similar results in their bodies as to what was just happening. And I had a really nice practice of patients. So they were all willing, and I started having incredible results with them. This led to other therapists being attracted to my work. So I started to teach therapists the technique, which I call fluid isometrics, so that they could dive in and work in their patient's fascia system. So fascia is the connective tissue that connects every cell from head to toe. It's the tissue that we target, and we have trillions of cells. So what I've learned over the years is that scar tissue, whether from injury or surgery or unconscious posture and incorrect breathing, this will create compression and blocks to blood and oxygen flow. So it was really exciting because I was able to teach these therapists how to do this technique. But more importantly, I really wanted to teach people to self-care. Going to therapists on a regular basis can be costly, and not everybody has access to that. And especially today, a lot of us actually can't physically go to see a therapist depending on where we live in the situation of the world. So about 10 years ago, I intuitively developed a tool which is called the Block Buddy. And this basically replaces the work of the practitioner's hands. So I teach you how to lie on the tool, move through the layers of fascia to reach those adhesions that are blocking blood and oxygen flow to cells, engage proper diaphragmatic breathing, which when we breathe diaphragmatically, we feed the body up to 6 times the oxygen because of the absorption, as well as to understand proper foundations in the body so we can support cellular alignment. So as long as every one of our trillions of cells is positioned where it should be, theoretically, there's optimal flow and all cells should be able to do their job with ease. It's when we don't have flow to the cells that they start to initially give us a signal of pain to let us know that they need something. But if we ignore that and we don't have a very good connection to pain, we fear pain, we avoid it, it's going to start to scream louder. And if we continue to ignore those signals, eventually areas of the body will shut down. And I see that as really being the state of most people today. I don't feel that the majority of us are feeding our cells effectively. So we have areas of the body that become cold and dense. And fascia will grip and adhere to the body, to bone, with a force up to 2,000 pounds per square inch. So if you think about how incredible that force is, when it's gripping to bone, it's pretty hard to release that because it's magnetically sealed. However, with the process, with block therapy, we teach you how to move through those layers of adhesion all the way to the bone, inflate that tissue with oxygen through the training of proper breathing, and then reconfigure your foundations to support proper cell alignment. And that's why we make the tool specifically out of, they were made up of cedar until recently. Now they're made of bamboo. Both cedar and bamboo are similar to bone in density, which allows us to drive through those layers in the fascia and get to the root of the issue.
So, Diana, this is really important stuff. I just wanted to kind of break down some of the terminology here. First of all, let's talk about fascia, because we understand bones, we understand muscles, we understand organs, and we understand even tendons and ligaments, right? We understand skin. What's fascia?
So fascia is the connective tissue. And the way that I see it personally is that every single cell membrane is connected to the fascia. So it's like we're like a sponge basically, or even the honeycomb, which without the honeycomb, it's the honey is just a liquid. So if we didn't have our fascia system, we would simply be a puddle of cells. The fascia gives our body the integrity and it's here to support us. So what's really interesting as an example, cellulite. It's a very visual manifestation of fascia. So again, we have trillions of cells and every cell has its proper position. And our fascia is ingenious in its design and is here to keep us upright and positioned correctly. So if we don't, however, adhere to proper foundation through understanding posture and breathing, we start to let gravity manipulate us. We start to become shorter and wider. We typically age in a forward rotational direction. And as we do that, because we're starting to tip over, the fascia will start to grip and adhere to bone to create that stability. Energy doesn't flow in a straight line. It flows in a wave until it hits an obstruction, at which time it will spiral and then turn to chaos. So when you look at something like cellulite, those dimples are actually the spiral pattern of the fascia gripping onto the bone. So that again is there to support us and protect us. However, if left over years, decades, that also becomes problematic because those grips act like scar tissue blocking blood and oxygen flow to cells on the other side. So we really need to understand that we are literally like a sponge, and every single moment of every day, the sponge is absorbing our environment, and that can be people's energy, it can be toxicity in the air, it can be the foods that we eat. All of these things affect our fascia system. When we breathe properly and diaphragmatically, what we're supposed to be doing is pulling in the moment, but then releasing all that doesn't serve us. But because we're not connected to that full breath, we end up pulling in the moments and storing them in our system. And that adds weight and toxicity to us. So that's just a bit of a, I'm sure you have a little bit to add here about the fascia as well. I go on a bit of a tangent when talking about how I see it because of how my hands have learned
Yeah,
this.
and I love it because, like you said, fascia is something that, number one, it's like a sponge in the sense that it responds to the stresses and the experiences that you have had in life, meaning that it lays extra thickness and extra tissues and extra connections in an area that is under more stress. Hence, that area becomes more taut. In an area that is not as stressed, then that tends to be more pliable and loose and movable, basically. So, if you, for you guys, for in the audience, if you guys want to visualize this, for instance, imagine when you wring a towel, what ends up happening is that if you take a towel and you keep wringing it, it gets more taut and stronger as far as the tension in there. But the problem is it's also getting shorter. It also becomes less flexible and all these things. And one of the things about fascia is it's supposed to be like saran wrap. It's supposed to be flexible, wrapping around everything, all your organs and tissues. And so when it's taut like that, if it's wrapping around your organs, it can cut the circulation, it can cut the blood flow, it can cut the movement, nerve flow, all of those different things if it's not supposed to be in that situation. So traumas and scar tissues that you have accumulated over a lifetime kind of perpetuate this, ultimately leading into deterioration of many different things across your body. This stuff is literally throughout head to toe in your body, basically. And oftentimes we don't really pay attention to it because, let's say, the surgeon, when he's trying to get to an organ, it cuts right through the saran wrap just to get to it. But then once they're out of it, now you have scar tissue. As anybody who has had a C-section can tell you, that area ends up being weaker. It has these adhesions in there and it doesn't work like it was supposed to. So this is a very, very important thing for our audience members to remember. So awesome. So Diana, what are some of the challenges that you've seen people face because of this problem with fascia out there? You mentioned anxiety as one of the things that you experienced personally. What are some of the other things that you might have seen?
Basically, I see the fascia system and the adhesions and scar tissue that develop really is the root of the suffering that we have, because through our conscious diaphragmatic breath, this is how we connect the external and the internal world together. And when we're talking about the foundations in the body, the diaphragm is the foundation of the rib cage and everything above it. So if we haven't been conscious breathers, what ultimately happens is this foundation becomes weak. And over time, we fall in to that core space, displacing the internal organs. So that can affect digestion, liver function, the ability for our blood sugar to be properly controlled. It can affect the way that we breathe, the heart muscle. Basically, to me, the way that I see it is every cell has its proper alignment. And as long as that cell can be reached with flow, again, there shouldn't be any challenges. But because we allow gravity to compress us, then all the cells, whether it's muscle cell, organ cell, skin cell, hair cell, whatever the cells are, they aren't being properly fed and cleaned. So they're going to undergo the aging process, which ultimately I don't see that we need to undergo the aging process as we have been going through this. So um, even things like weight loss, I see it as, because again, I was the person that was doing the work. I was less calories in, more energy expenditure, and I was actually getting bigger. So the rules of weight loss didn't apply to me. So the way that I see it is compression and ballooning. When we fall in, tissue has to move outward. So we often feel as we get older, we get that spare tire or that bulging belly. And that to me is more a function of the falling in of the weak foundation. And then when we do that, we have less flow. So we become more toxic, like a bog. We grow algae inside, and then we attract parasites and other things that, cause us to become more toxic, and toxic cells expand. So weight loss is a massive thing when it comes to understanding how to breathe properly. In fact, in 2014, they did a study in Australia proving 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation. So looking at diseases, often it's because of a toxic environment that we end up with disease. Our lymphatic system isn't able to function properly, if we don't have proper flow to feed and clean that system. And I also see exercise as being a real factor in how we do it and the problems it creates. Because as you were mentioning, we want there to be flexibility and fluidity in the fascia. So if we're in the gym and we're repetitively working out these muscles in our body, part of the way that they become bigger is by becoming shorter. So we're shortening the body, and most of the time we're not doing it in perfect balance. Same as a sport. If you play something like tennis, I've seen people that are high level tennis players that have a forearm that's double the size on one than the other. And this creates an asymmetry in the body. So ultimately, for every cell to be positioned where it should be, we need to be balanced and symmetrical. And over time, due to what we do all the time, that's what adds up. So it's the posture that we assume day by day that adds up to create the areas of restriction that block blood and oxygen flow, and even the face. I've noticed when I'm stressed, I will reactively purse my lips. And then I started seeing how I was getting the lines around my lips. So whenever I catch myself, I put a smile on my face, because that's a habit that I have posturally, which is creating a process of aging. So I'm very happy to say that as a result of being quite aware of this unconscious habit that I have, that I've become more conscious about, that I'm starting to go backward through time in the way that those lines appear. So it's really interesting when we start to really understand this fascia as this living, dynamic, conscious tissue that is constantly responding to the forces, to the stresses of life. And yeah, when we can really tap into it and understand from a really simplistic way that what we want to do is melt through scar tissue and adhesion, promote oxygenation of the blood, and then align ourselves properly, we really have this ability to go through time, moving backward through time in our tissue, pulling out old trauma, old injury, and also really slow down the aging as we understand it is today.
I actually think that you look great and amazing. And, one of the things I was going to mention about beauty is that there is symmetry and there's vitality that's often involved. And people pick that up whether, you know what the person is doing or not. You just intrinsically connect and understand that we're built into that even as babies, basically. And like you said, breathing, fascia, and of course, I'm a big proponent of breathing and oxygenation for brain's sake because of my bias with brain. And I know that the brain that controls the function of everything else cannot operate if you have the right food, you have the right resting, but yet you do not have the proper breathing and the oxygenation. So these things just beautifully come together, and the end result is that vitality, symmetry, that ultimately we interpret as beauty and health, basically. So it's very, very important. So people come, and naturally, because we have been on this planet and we have been living, right? We have accumulated habits, we have accumulated trauma and scar tissues. So, what are some of the challenges that you see when people take the block buddy and try to improve their health, or mindset shifts that they have to go through, basically?
I think one of the first things is that it seems too simple to be really effective. I mean, literally, we teach you how to lie on the stool and move around and breathe. And for many, that concept is very simple. So I think sometimes the simplest solutions are overlooked because, I mean, the medical language is so complex. So when we're thinking about the physical body, the emotional body, I think if it doesn't seem complex, it's too hard to wrap your head around that something so simple can be so profound. I also feel that pain is really the biggest challenge for people because, especially if you've been in chronic pain for a long time, the thought of becoming a pain seeker, which is what we teach people to be, can seem overwhelming. But what is really exciting is to understand that pressure fibers are larger than pain fibers. So when we start applying pressure to the body, the pain changes. Also, when we're blocking, we're not adding pain. What we're doing is we are making you aware of the pain that's underneath the surface from what you're consciously aware so that you can tap in, pull it up to the surface, and then get rid of it. And I find that people are trapped in a pain fear cycle. So if you don't understand a way out of your pain, we contract. Pain, fear, and stress cause us to react when we hold the breath. And oxygen is the first and foremost nutrient every cell needs to thrive. We die in 5 minutes if we're deprived of oxygen. The brain does. So every cell is the same in that context. So if we're not breathing optimally, then we are accumulating more pain. So through the process of blocking, when you dive in and you connect, and it's all very slow and meditative, we connect to the parasympathetic system, and also you're in control. Nobody's applying pain to you. You're in control of the pain. So we teach you your breath is your guide. As long as you're breathing in a relaxed way, you will be feeding and healing your tissue. If something hurts so much that it takes that relaxed breath away, then that's your body saying, nope, that's too intense. We need to back off. So you can be blocking in bed, which is beautiful, especially for people that really struggle with mobility. You don't have to get on a floor. We can start in the bed, and then over time, as we start to melt those adhesions and oxygenate the body and become stronger, then we can move to a more advanced version on the floor. And then from there, we also have very passive approaches, and then we can move it up and ramp it to be more of an exercise, combining isometrics while we're on the block. Because when we're isometrically holding, unlike exercise where we're doing something fast and vigorous, we're putting our body in a safe place, because as you're holding, you're not going through all of these vigorous movements that can allow tissue to rip or tear. And because you're constantly being guided on how to breathe properly, it's very safe. So most people, are going to be injured if you lift something heavy and your back goes out. It's because you're lifting without breathing. So when we understand how to move our body with the breath, we keep our body safe, our tissue safe. It's when we are unconscious of our body and the movements that we put ourselves in a negative state and potential for injury.
I love it. Yeah, a lot of times when I was back in clinic days, a lot of people, their core was weak, but oftentimes this was related to their breathing. And you would notice that when they tried to lift something, when they tried to sit or stand up or push a door, they naturally hold their breath as they do that. And I used to tell them, by holding your breath, you actually increase the pressure on your discs and your internals, your eyeballs, the all of those things, your arteries, that you increase the pressure 11 folds, which is much more likely to cause a burst or a tear or some kind of an injury in the process. It is not a natural thing to do, but it's a compensatory mechanism. And that was one of the things that I mentioned in our fitness program, like you're talking about these adhesions that have formed, preventing you. Many people, like we're approaching the end of the year, right? So people are setting out these New Year resolutions to go out and work out. But if you have compensation in your movement, if you have learned to improperly move because something doesn't work right in your body, then you actually increase your chance of injuring yourself, because you're asking your body to do something that it normally is not designed to do. So you increase the wear and tear. So something like this is a foundational and essential first step to make sure that your body is on the keel, on the level ground, basically, before you actually ask it to do something, right?
And I see that it all really also comes down to tissue temperature, because it really does come down to flow. And I've had the opportunity to live on a riverbank most of my life. So right now I'm on the 13th floor, the river below me. So being in Winnipeg, I see the river freeze and thaw every year. And just like the river, we want to have a high flow in the body. When the flow is high, cells are clean, debris is removed very efficiently, and things are good. It's when the flow slows down and then eventually almost stops, like the frozen river, that we don't have the ability for the blood to reach those cells and to clean the area out. And the way that I understand the body, I've done so many assessments where I see that the calves and the feet are really the prime major culprit, cause sites, I call them, for a lot of what's going on, because the fascia will literally wind around the calf bone, affect the alignment of the foot. And because it's the furthest from the engine, the diaphragm, it's where it's the most frozen. So even people coming to us, say with migraines, for example, you can spend months and months working in this area to get maybe a temporary relief. But unless we actually look at the body as a whole and we address those cause sites, every time you get up to walk, because of the way that fascia wraps around the shins, we're going to get pulled back into that forward alignment, which is going to pull the rib cage forward, blocked flow to the brain and continue to keep those negative symptoms alive for you. So that's part of this process as well, is being able to look at the whole body and to be able to recognize what's really causing the pain, because they're generally at a distance and we typically have more than one cause site in the body affecting any specific issue. And I mean, low back pain is such a common issue, whether it's herniated discs, spondylolisthesis, just chronic back pain, whatever it is, sciatica. That again is largely going to be impacted by how the fascia will wrap around the calves and the feet, holding us in that forward direction, causing everything to shoot backward. So if those discs get shot backward and then we approach the area where the disc is sore or not in alignment, again, we're not really addressing the reason for that. So again, it can be a temporary improvement, but it's not going to solve the issue and bring the body back into balance.
I once heard a orthopedic doctor say that evolution got us to stand upright and walk upright, but the biomechanics and the internals of us have not really caught on with that, because when we were on fours, the biomechanics of your arms and legs stabilize things in a completely different way. But when you're walking on just feet, then there's this whipping motion in your upper body. So if you have a dysfunction down low, it really exacerbates and becomes much bigger up here on top. So you end up all these upper body problems as a result.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, what's your suggestion? We're supposed to catch up with evolution. I can't wait that long.
Well, and the way that I see it, it's not about block therapy, it's about fascia decompression and aligning the body. So there's a lot of wonderful tools out there. But I do see the challenge is that a lot of the other tools, because of the nature of the tool itself, they don't get to the root specifically, because if it's a plastic or a spongy type thing, that will feel good and it will affect the surface layers, but we really need to drive through those adhesions and get all the way to the root of the issue, which is at the bone, which is why the tools are made of the materials that they are, so that they're dense enough to be able to communicate well with bone. Actually, it was years ago when I was taking Iyengar yoga. There was this beautiful woman in her 60s. So I'm of Danish descent, and she's Danish. So she had this lovely accent, and she was teaching us, and she would always say, "Bone on wood is good." And that long before this process even happened for me. And it just became part of what I really understood. And it is very comforting. It's like when you're lying on this tool, it's like you're giving your cells a hug. So again, it connects you to that parasympathetic nervous system. It's very calming. We hold each position for a minimum of 3 minutes. So everything is very slow, very mindful. There's nothing jarring and fast. People do have healing crises or healing opportunities, whichever way you'd like to look at it, which is important because we are literally putting the body back. And I mean, we might have had a car accident which jolted the entire body out of alignment, or a fracture, or some kind of injury, or an emotional trauma, or a major life event. All of these things affect how we breathe, and it affects our alignment. So as we're starting to move backward through time in the tissue, those old areas of trauma and toxins, they come out and they surface so that we can ask them to leave. Sometimes it can be a bit of a journey. Sometimes people can have a skin rash, or anything coming to the surface, emotional releases. I used to have nightmares in my 20s when I was a total mess. And I used to have them 3 times a week. So now I might have them twice a year. And I'm aware that I'm tapping into some of that deeper, older energy that I haven't still processed, so that it can come to my consciousness and then I can say goodbye to it. So when you understand the process and you understand pain, pain is simply a sensation, especially when you have a path to follow. It's just a sensation that gives you awareness and attention. And really, pain is the self. It's like the baby crying. It's
Right.
we need to understand that, because I mean, pain is of massive value if we love it for what it is. So we do teach people to become pain seekers.
Right. In my personal, or I should say professional life, basically, what I have oftentimes noticed is that if you take symptoms, whatever symptoms they may be it congestion, be it a fever, be it pain like you're describing, you take any symptom and we're not going to judge it as good or bad, but it's a symptom, it's a sign, something that your body's trying to tell you. And you try to minimize it, you try to shush it, basically. What ends up happening is oftentimes it goes in deeper and it becomes more entrenched and rooted and more part of the system, as opposed to staying out of the system and being apart from the system, something that you can get rid of. And many times some of the chronic illnesses that we end up having, that there's like literally structural damage, it starts out in this surface thing that keeps getting buried deeper and deeper until it becomes an organ or systemic problem, that I've seen very, very often, actually.
What I do love is the body's ability to regenerate and heal when we start applying right action. And even in the world when we had our initial lockdowns, it was so exciting to see how quickly the planet cleaned itself up. We were
Yeah.
hearing stories of dolphins coming in and being able to see the pyramids, which had been blocked because of pollution for so long. And we are these absolutely incredible containers for our soul. And
Right.
we have this incredible ability to regenerate if we know what to do. And really, it just does come down to providing flow. So I do love that about it, because we can move backward through time very effectively and really pull out a lot of what has been compromising our way of living and lead better lives by really just understanding how to breathe properly.
Exactly. And that's the good news, because some of these deeper stuff that's within you, once you actually start moving in the right direction, they start coming out of the system and get pulled out from, and then they, like you just described, they start coming to the surface, and eventually they move out entirely. And that in itself, being aware and mindful of that process of it going deep and coming back out, is a very, very important thing for any human being to understand about their body. So definitely, I appreciate it. Tell us a little bit more about how people can contact you and work with you as well.
One of the most exciting parts for me is our block therapy community on Facebook. So it's a private community, but it's free to join, and we have almost 4,000 members now of people blocking. So this is a wonderful way to dive in and to see what other people's experience is. For me, that is really the key. Rather than spending time on getting research, I wanted to spend time on helping people to learn how to heal themselves and see the benefits. So it's lovely because we have people every day posting in our group. They often think it's like miraculous. It's not. It's just understanding the fascia system and how to promote flow. But people that have had issues for decades, or finally they're able to improve their size and shape, or their hair color is coming back because they're rejuvenating the flow to the hair follicles. Like all
Right.
these happen. And also the kids stuff is just it is so exciting for me what we're doing with kids. So that's one thing, is on Facebook block therapy community. And
Okay.
then I have my website blocktherapy.com, so we've got a lot of information on our website. And basically we want everybody to start with our starter program, which is basically you get the tool, and then you get videos that you keep for life covering the entire body, as well as a 2-week free trial in our membership, which has tons of programs covering a whole raft of things, even a fitness program that my nephew Quinn, who's my partner, he also put together and did, because he was a physique bodybuilder. And he he got rid of the additional what's it called, the, the protein powders, all the
Oh,
different
yes, yes.
things that you take to try to increase your size. I said, you got to get
Right.
rid of all that stuff and let your fascia and let your cells and the oxygenation really show the beauty of balance and symmetry and
Mhm.
strength. So he's put together a beautiful program to teach people how to strengthen in proper alignment. We have a women's health program. We have programs covering everything. So the website is really the place to go, blocktherapy.com. And and then people can reach out to me. They can directly connect right through there if they want to reach out and they have any questions.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to go ahead and put all of that information in the description box. So you guys go ahead and take Deanna up on that offer, check it out, and see how you could benefit from this. I can tell you from my experience, from days in the clinic and things that people have come in with over lifetimes, that this stuff is really, really significant. It's life changing, and you owe it to yourself to go ahead and really explore this for yourselves and the potential that you can have. So highly recommend it. Do that. Also, if you have not subscribed to our channel, please make sure you go ahead and do so that future experts that come in, you'll be always in contact and get the notifications for it as well. Deanna, I really appreciate you for being here and giving of your time. I know you're very busy and everything. So I really appreciate you, your message, and what you're doing in this world. And I look forward to actually having you on our fitness program as well. So definitely and exciting things coming up. So see you guys all around. Deanna, any final words for our audience before we part?
Well, first of all, just I want to thank you so much for inviting me. It is such a pleasure to have spent time with you and to learn more about you. And I look forward to doing a lot more in the future with you. And for everybody listening, really, it's a time that we need to give ourselves self-care. It's the most important time, I believe, in human history to turn inward, to connect to yourself, connect to yourselves, understand what is really the most important thing is how we feel inside. When we feel positive and at peace inside, we can handle the stresses of life. We have more endurance. We have more capacity to simply live the best life possible and to tap into our creative potential. So we all need to do that and share our gifts and light with the world now. So that would be my last message here.
I, I love it. I love it. Yeah, connectivity is the name of the game, within and without. Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. We'll see you around. Cheers.
Thank you so much.